Now, Audi has just unveiled the Audi A6 e-tron concept at the Shanghai Auto Show. And what's most interesting to me is not that it looks almost exactly like a Lincoln Zephyr, also introduced at the Shanghai Auto Show and only intended for the Chinese market. But what's most interesting about the A6 e-tron concept here is the brand new design language of the car. It's more subtle and clean design, softer radiuses in both graphics and bodywork. So that's what I want to talk about in this video. We're gonna have a look at the front, side, and rear of the car and show you what I like. And there is one little piece that I dislike about this design, and I know that's usually the case, but in this case I have a really good reason for it, so stick with me on that one. So let's have a look at the front view here before we jump in. Let's talk about the design first, and then we'll jump into some of the spec and tech, which is also pretty cool for the Audi e-tron here. So here it is, the Audi A6 e-tron concepts. Obviously, e-tron means it's going to be an all-electric car, and the thing with the e-tron here is that it feels like it's close to production. It feels like this is pretty much what the production version will look like. And if we look at the design, it's a brand new styling from Audi, which is about time because they've been using the same kind of styling cues for a very long time, since pretty much the Audi R8 came out in 2008, I believe it came out. And what I like about this design here is they use what they call the inverted front fascia. So what exactly does that mean? What is inverted here? So when we look at the graphics of the car in the front end, it all makes sense when why the Audi call this inverted, because where you used to have body colored on any car, you now have black, and what used to be black is now body colored. And I think this is a good approach to designing electric cars and still have them have sort of a grille in the front, because the grille is now body colored, but it's still separated from the rest of the graphics in the front right here. And these headlights, they are the slimmest headlights that's ever been put on any Audi. And the thing about these headlights is they're so slim that you can't really fit a proper headlight in there. So what did Audi decide to do here? Well, they decided to join the trend that we've been talking about for a while now, and that is to have the main headlight hidden somewhere else in the front bumper, or in this case, in the front air intake. So the main headlight is situated right here. This is the headlight that you really want to be working when you're driving at night. Now, these are fully customizable. The daytime running lights are fully customizable to whatever the customer wants it to project. And you can also play a video game on this. So the idea here is that it's a pretty cool idea, because EVs, the main downside with EVs, except for the range, is the charging time. So let's say you go and charge the Audi A6 e-tron here. You have to wait maybe 20-25 minutes, something like that, and you have nothing to do. You're bored. So what do? You bring out a controller and you stand outside, and you can have the headlights, these slim things right here, they project a video game onto the wall in front of the car. And you can even have two players, so you have one player standing right here and playing his video game, and the other guy standing here. And you can play video games that are specifically designed for this Audi car, the Audi A6 e-tron concept, and you can play the game while the car is charging. That is pretty cool. One thing I want to mention when it comes to Audi, I've said this a while now, I think Audi has always been in the forefront when it comes to lighting design. Ever since they first came out with the R8 in 2008, that was the first car that had the LED signature in the headlight. So you create an identity with the lights, and ever since they came out with the R8, Audi has always had this almost a separate design passion for light design, and this is no different. If we take a look at the side view here, for example, and talk about the silhouette, I want to talk to you about the rear end here. So this is a sportback design, meaning that it slopes back very tightly and doesn't really come back up right here in the rear. But at the same time, it looks more like a sedan to me, like, for example, the Audi A7, which is a proper sportback. That means that, in my opinion, it's a proper sportback. That means that the line here, it goes down and it never goes back up. It just slopes down and then abruptly ends right there. This is the A7 silhouette, if you look at it from a side view, this is what the A7 would look like. But this little thing, this little upswing here in the back makes such a difference for how you perceive this design. It makes it more of a sedan than a proper sportback, in my opinion, and it looks really good. If I were to choose between this and the recently unveiled Mercedes EQS, I think this looks a lot better. And I believe probably the front space compared to the EQS here is bigger, because the A-pillar starts a lot further back than if you have the Mercedes, which you have the A-pillar starting somewhere around here. So this space right here is the difference between having it look like an ICE car and having it look like, in the Mercedes case, a proper EV. Alright, so now let's talk about the rear design. This is a very interesting rear end and something that we haven't really seen from Audi yet. Also, of course, both in the front and the rear we have the Audi rings illuminated with the light bar in the rear here. And this light bar is actually made out of an OLED display. So it's a very high definition 3D-like light bar, which also can project pretty much anything you like. Since it's an OLED display, you can configure it to show or visualize whatever you like in the rear. And also they have the brake lights and everything integrated here. But what's interesting here is the integrated spoiler here that you have. Kind of interesting, and it's beautifully done how they integrated that in the bodywork of the car, because you see underneath here you have the rear window is stretching actually all the way down to this point right here. So this whole piece is window, and you have this bridge, which is the spoiler kind of bridging over this window in the lower part of the window. And another thing I want to mention when it comes to the light design is that in this black part right here and in this black part in the front, Audi has actually put in small little projectors that will project, for example, the indicator onto the ground when you have the turn signal on. And this is a very cool and very interesting safety feature, because if you're for example, if you're on a bike or something like that, if you're a pedestrian, you have a clear communication from the car what it's intending to do, and not just by looking at the car, but now it's also projected onto the ground off the side of the car. And this color is called Helios Silver, and what this reminded me of when I first saw this car is one of my favorite colors and paint jobs of any production car, and that is the M3 E46 CSL, which has a very satin, almost chrome satin paintwork, and it's just beautiful. And this kind of reminds me of that, even though it looks a little bit bluer on the Audi here. So what is the little change that I want to do on the Audi here? And we can take this view to talk about that. So one problem that I have with car designs is parallel lines. Parallel lines just ruins the dynamic of a car design, whether you have it in the body, in the three key lines of the car, so whether you have it in this baseline in comparison to the shoulder and then in relation to the greenhouse, neither of these lines can be parallel. And you don't want to have parallel lines in the graphics either. And that's the problem that I have with the side view here. I think this part right here, this is a little bit confusing, and it doesn't feel Audi to me, because it's not as dynamic as Audi's should be, in my opinion, because we have these parallel lines here, a thick graphic feature that is very pronounced in the side view. It's kind of popped up right in my face when I saw this. This was the part that I grabbed my attention, because it was so unlike Audi to do something like that. So what I want to do is either we can reduce this and have it slope down something like this, so we don't have this be a thick parallel bar that goes along the side. What that does, it cheapens the design. It makes it look like a cheap body kit or something like that. If you look at badly built replicas of car, they usually have a lot of thick parallel design styling in the bodywork and in the overall graphics of the car, and that's what I think is going on here as well. So what I want to do is just a quick little change. Let's see if we can change this and make it into something that looks a little less static and a bit more dynamic. Bring this down to somewhere about around here, and then let's erase the bottom part right here, something like this, So now we don't have this thick, massive bar in the lower part of the car. And personally, I think it looks a lot better this way. And then we can try to just blend this in, something like this. We don't have to do a complete redesign here. That's not the intent. But just want to show you from this, where we have this parallel bar right here, or graphic that stretches along the entire side of the car into the fenders and into the rear bumper as well. It keeps the same thickness all over, and that is the problem. So we need to reduce that at some point. And why not do that in the side of the car? Because if you look at it from a side view, that's the key view. You want to have some dynamic movement in, so that's where I decided to reduce the thickness of the car. Because the thing with parallel lines, I just quickly want to show you why it feels like a static solution to a graphic or a design when you have parallel lines. It just becomes uninteresting because your brain can see that these are parallel, and you can expect, or you can predict where this is going, because there's no change in where they're heading, and there's never going to be a change in the thickness or the dynamics of these lines because they are parallel. What if we just removed one of these lines and removed both lines, and then we create something like this, and now all of a sudden we have some movement in these two lines, because we can see that it's heading this way, and it's gonna get narrower the further, at this point right here, they're going to intersect at some point. It just becomes a more interesting shape than we have parallel lines. And now if we want to create a car with as few lines as possible and still have a visualization of what's the front and rear of the car, what we would do is just first create a baseline, which we can have be a straight line, and then we create a line that goes up like this. And now obviously, if you would guess which is the front and which is the rear of these two lines, my guess is that you would think that it's heading this way because it's leaning forward towards that end. And if we put wheels out right here, you can see that we can start to even sketch a car using only these two lines, something like this. And then we have a dynamic looking car with a movement looking at it from a side view. And that's why we can't have parallel lines too much in car design. You can use it in the graphics of the car, for example in the light bar and the headlights as well, but not in some of the key features of the car, like the side view right here. So let's talk about some of the spec and tech for the Audi A6 e-tron concept. It's powered by 470 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque with dual motors, and it will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in less than 4 seconds if you choose the higher spec car. With a full battery, Audi states that the concept can do 435 miles on a single charge. Now this will come in a version that does 0 to 60 in about 7 seconds as well. I'm not sure if that's going to be a quattro model, meaning dual motor, or a single motor. Now the 435 mile range is always interesting when companies come out and claim that their electric cars have this massive range without having it tested in real life. So I'm going to take this with a grain of salt. Maybe they do 435 miles of range, but the thing is, when you're driving it on a test track of Audi and when you're driving it out in the real world, it's a big difference, as I showed you in one of my Tesla videos when we drove across Florida. You can go and check that out, it's right here on the channel. Claimed range and the real range are two very different numbers, but who knows, maybe they're right about the 435 miles here on a single charge. I hope so, that would be awesome. Now you do have the option of fast charging. You can charge from 5 to 80% in less than 25 minutes when you're connected to one of these fast charging stations. Overall, I think this Audi e-tron, A6 e-tron, is a very cool design from Audi. I really like it, except for the parallel lines as I showed you in the side here. But other than that, that's just a small detail. This is about the brand new design language from Audi. It's a very sleek design, and as I've said before as well, I think they are starting to understand that it's not, less is more, especially when it comes to EVs. It's all about the graphics of the car and the identity of the brand. You want to hammer that in as much as possible, and the way to do that today is to work on some key features in the front, some key features in the rear, graphic features, and the proportions of the car. Anything else that you add to the car, any lines that not necessarily have to be in the car. They're just gonna blur that identity of the car. So you want to keep it simple when it comes to the body of the car and work on the graphics and proportions to hammer in the identity of whatever brand this is. And I think Audi is doing a great job here. I really like the front end of this. We talked about the Q4 e-tron and how busy that looks in the front. This stripped down and looks a lot better in my opinion. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.